is not the sense of humour, but the fact that they need a weapon.
I started siding with Mark, thinking, okay, you're a bit facetious at times, but, get over it, that's all right.
You watch it and it's just painful sometimes, and that's what makes it really nice, really kind of tingly and good fun.
We needed to give the relationship in the first series a kind of backstory, a history, as if you really would have liked these people to be together.
Oh, sorry, I was in the shower.
Oh, God, sorry, I'm early.
No, I'm behind.
No, really, I got up too early this morning and I haven't been able to lose the time all day.
I wouldn't have thought you were the type to get so hyper on a first date.
I was aware that you would see them married for 10 minutes and then that marriage fall apart. And the rest of the series, in theory, would then just be about the divorce. A couple that you'd more or less never seen together would be getting a divorce. Now, that had a sort of limited poignancy. You think, well, okay, yes, but you were never together as far as I'm concerned. And having got to that point very, very quickly, the only way we can indicate what the lost marriage was like is to do flashbacks, is to do a sort of complicated time frame thing.
Becky!
Mark.
It is a romantic comedy, but it's a romantic comedy backwards because it ends with a couple unhappy.
What would you do if I ever left you?
Joking Apart is unusual. It's a romantic comedy about a love that failed. And I don't think you get very many of those. You're always tempted to make it a happy ending.
My wife left me. She said she was never coming back.
The stand-up routines was a mystery.
I'm not joking.
I said, no, please tell me, these stand-up bits, are they just in the mind? Because they would sort of put a bit of Vaseline around the lens or something. It made them look a bit dreamy at one stage. They were thinking of doing that. Or am I a stand-up comedian in it? Am I a comedy writer who's out there in the clubs performing my own stuff? Or is it just simply something that's going on in my own head?
It's clearer if you read the script than it is if you watch it. That what you are seeing is not real. He isn't a stand-up comedian. This is simply a stylised way of demonstrating how he thinks. That when he thinks about a situation, when he analyses a situation, he thinks in punchlines, he thinks in comedy. It was never clear or explicit that this was not real, this was his thought processes. Like he was a man with a stand-up comedian in his head.
I had a bad experience at a funeral once. I caught the bouquet.
It was very funny.
What was?
Called the bouquet. It was very funny.
I said that out loud.
I knew why they were there. They were there to hurry the narrative along, so you didn't have to have exposition and scenes and stuff like that. You could get to the point and set up a scene, and it worked well to some extent in the pilot.
In the original pilot, the stand-up routines were shot in a very, very sort of void-like place that was sort of that was nowhere and no when. It was more obvious, perhaps, that he wasn't in a real place, but it was hell to look at. It was hell. It was sort of cold, uncomfortable and odd, and everybody who looked at that pilot said, what is that supposed to be? That's just odd, it's just weird. So we went completely the other way, in my view, wrongly, and did it as a real nightclub.
And they said, oh, just film it. We'll drop them in for the studio audience to sort of let them know what's going on. But at the end of the series, we'll rethink it, and we'll reshoot them in some way or rework them. And at the end of both the series, they said, well, look, it'll save $5,000 if we keep what we've originally shot. I mean, it'll cost a bit to redo that, so well, you wouldn't mind, would you? And I said meekly on each occasion, yes.
It works all right in the first episode, I think. It's quite poignant. There's one or two decent-ish by their bleeding fingernails gags. But after that, it just gets in the way of the flow of the farce. And a farce, you want to keep going. You want to make it be clear that people don't have time to think of a better idea. So the last thing you want to do is see the same character you're seeing running around in a bathrobe stop for a moment of comedic reflection.
The stand-up stuff was confusing, and it confused me, and I think it confused the audience. It also got in the way when Seinfeld took over, because we started the show before Seinfeld.
I think it's actually wrong to say that Joking Apart predated the pilot of Seinfeld. I think the pilot of Seinfeld and the pilot of Joking Apart are made, I looked this up once, at more or less exactly the same time. So it was a case of me having the same idea as a much better comedy writer. Damn.
It was a false comparison. And I think Joking Apart would have existed just as well without the stand-up stuff. We found another way to move the narrative along without it.
It's interesting as you watch Seinfeld that they go through the same process with it. At the beginning of Seinfeld, There's an awful lot of Jerry Seinfeld's very, very good stand-up routine. In fact, in some of the early episodes, that's the good bit, is him doing his comedy routine. Later on, as with Joking Apart, if you compare the two, you get a tiny amount, and then it's the plot of the show.
Perfect, so cool.
I wish, looking back on it, we'd had the courage just to say, sod the stand-up.
I can't stand naked at the front door. There are all sorts of perverts hanging about.
Well, I'll only be a minute.
I play a character called Tracy. How does the casting director tell your agent, we need her to play a Tracy, because she's called Tracy? So my agent was like, well, what do you mean by Tracy? Well, a bit ditzy, and I thought it was like Essex or something, but she was from, not Chelsea as such, she was from suburbia who'd moved into Chelsea. So she's a bit batty.
What is it? What's wrong?
A car went past the house! Thank God it missed!
A mixture between getting things wrong and putting her foot in it without realising what she's done. She's not calculating. Do you know what I mean? So she's not a bimbo. She's quite clever in her own logic. Well, that's what they sold it to me as anyway. I'm not sure if that's true.
But then I've never been in a comedy.
Oh, you will be.
Me and Paul, the guy playing my husband, we'd talked about comedy faces and what we could get away with. Because obviously you get the straight pair, and within their own funniness, you've got to get the opposite couple.
May I come in? Pardon?
Once we set off down that route with comedy face number 7, you're like, or eyebrow acting, and then we started making little in-jokes as who can raise it higher and who can be the maddest.
When would be convenient for you?
Now.
Right, fine, in you come.
Nothing's rooted in the early 90s, apart from some design features, especially of telephones and things. But the actual themes are universal, and the embarrassment that Stephen writes so well is universal.
Who was on the phone?
What?
Didn't I hear the phone ring when I was in the loo before we got all distracted?
Oh, sorry, I completely forgot. It was Tracy for you.
Oh, have I to phone her back?
No, she said she'd hang on.
The thing about it being black, I think, is one of its strengths. Black and painful and very funny, and you just... he is.
What are you doing in my bed?
I was a bit tired.
You know, have you ever been really down and out and you start attracting like mayhem and horribleness because you're just in this negative frame of mind, you know? So that's the kind of joy of watching somebody going down and not just making it worse for themselves and digging this massive hole. You know what I mean?
It's brilliantly written. It's constructed as a 3-act farce in 28 minutes. The first 10 minutes is funny enough, but it's setting up. The second 10 minutes is a development.
And then mad mayhem to round it up. So the link from the beginning to that, you almost have to listen to every word.
All the bits from the first 15, 20 minutes marry up.
I think this is where I came in.
It's a piece of genius, really, writing-wise. I wish I had that gift.
It will look to any modern viewer pretty primitive stuff in terms of what a sitcom can do and what we've seen sitcom do since. But at the time, that was a sitcom with an awful lot of shots in it, with an awful lot of setups, with an unusually high number of cameras, with an awful lot of pre-records to get what we needed in the can.
A friend of a friend whose wife had left him, he was watching the show, and his children were asleep upstairs. And when Mark squeeches Trevor in the face with the avocado, it was what he wanted to do to his wife's new boyfriend. And he was so moved by it that he found himself standing in his living room, punching the air and going, yes, like that, so loudly that his children came down and said, Daddy, you're right.
Because we went off and did other jobs in between and then came back to Joking Apart, each time you came back to Joking Apart, it was like just being with a group of friends. It wasn't like working at all.
The chemistry between us was just absolutely brilliant, and we used to skip to work.
I was exactly the same age as the cast, and better yet, slightly to the younger end. I was, about 30, 31. So that was quite nice. We were hanging out together. We had a tremendously good time together. We saw a lot of each other during the show, and that was brilliant fun. Thereafter, of course, I've time passing, I've become older than the cast I work with again. I'm now officially older than Doctor Who, and that's a very strange place to be.
I love the way you laugh. Especially your blouse.
I said stop it.
I laughed a lot, at the end of each day. My cheeks were kind of sore and my ribs hurt a bit. It was just it was warm, except for just before we went in front of a live audience when I felt physically sick.
It was that specifically directed and rehearsed that it just sailed through. It just went like that the day of the filming. The audience would come in, we'd do it, and be in the bar after an hour and a half. I mean, marvellous, really. Not going into the bar, which is always good.
I always seem to end up with the champagne.
Bob Spears was brilliant, and he, obviously, the Fawlty Towers thing and the connection he'd had to comedy in general. I was very scared of that.
It was, like touching Dad's army. This man worked on, all sorts of fantastic Fawlty Towers. He was there.
He was just like, yeah, anyway, mate, you stand there and get on with it and whatever, be funny, be faster.
He was very warm and easy. He was a nice man. I enjoyed working with him.
He used to just go mad in the gallery in the studio. And you could hear him from about 10 feet away in the cans of a cameraman who'd be like deaf, But it was just his quirk. He was delightful.
I don't think it is extravagantly conceited of us to say it was a better show than it was known to be. I think that's a fair point to make.
The first series of a sitcom, if it's half decent, should be followed, as a general rule, by the second series, so that it engages in the public consciousness and then can build from there. To do 2 series over a 4-year period, we had no chance of gaining momentum. And the most remarkable thing is that people remember it at all.
Kind of in retrospect now, I think that probably was a missed opportunity. It was mainly because of the amount of people that, stand beside me in the queue at the supermarket and say, "Joking Apart. God, that was a corker."
That's that girl from Joking Apart, isn't it? And I thought, they're having a laugh. It's one of my friends. I was in the supermarket and I heard it behind. And I turned around and I said, "Oh, come." And I didn't know them.
There's not a huge amount of other things in my career that people will point to and say, "That was fantastic." Necessarily, I've done a lot of work and it's been great and I've enjoyed it. But this is something that keeps coming up and people keep referring to it, which is amazing considering how long ago it was.
Oh, we love that show. Do you think it'll come back again? I mean, I'm totally amazed in that, don't you think?
But obviously it's there and it's in some people's psyche, and the people that saw it really enjoyed it and haven't forgotten it.
Drunks on public transport, and people sort of weaving across on the underground late at night and telling me in detail the plot of their favourite episode, which was a sanction of assault. Joking Apart, as I said before, it's the most enjoyable job I will ever do. Most jobs you do, and you write a line underneath them, you finish them, and they're gone. They're in the past. And Joking Apart, it's just one of those shows, it's the only show I've ever done, which I'm really happy to revisit.
I've never had a script again like this. I've never done a series as consistently good as this, and barking and weird. And
when you come across something like this that is a nugget, I mean, my accountant says to me, whenever he is feeling down and fed up, he puts on Joking Apart. And this is years later.
There are a lot of people who did watch it who still love it, which is a testimony to how good it was, I think.
Thank you. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. And in closing, I'd just like to thank one very special person, my wife, without whom... Ian.